So I'm going to talk about the modern development practices for WordPress plugins. Just very quick about myself. I'm a plugin developer since about 2013. I've currently got 3 plugins in the WordPress repository: Avatar Privacy, Media Credit, and WP Typography. And I'm also involved with WordPress core, specifically the privacy component. And yeah, as Martin already said, the Austrian locale for WordPress. Okay. A few notes on WordPress itself. As we've heard, WordPress places a large emphasis on backward compatibility, and until very recently, it even supported 5.2, which is very, very old, and it hasn't received any security updates in a long time. And some of this stems from the WordPress development started in 2003, and all code that was written predated current PHP standard recommendations. And so some parts of WordPress really carry a lot of technical depth because they're very old. And obviously, best practices have changed since PHP 4, which was still pretty new when WordPress was started. So things I'll talk about today, I'll only be able to really introduce the idea to you, because to go through everything in detail won't be possible in time for this talk. But so how can you use modern PHP versions safely, but while still supporting older WordPress versions? How can you handle dependencies, libraries, things you need only for the development version, unit testing, adhering to coding standards, having a good build infrastructure, and possibly also using continuous integration systems. So why should you use a newer PHP version as the minimum? It gives you access to new PHP language features like namespacing, auto-loading, traits, type hinting, various new operators like the null collapsing operator. All these things are not possible with PHP 5.2 and have only been introduced in 5.6, or not only, but yeah, nowadays you would use at least 5.6, which is what WordPress core has switched to, but even PHP 5.6 is not, it doesn't receive any updates anymore, no security fixes, nothing. And so really, we should all aim to make our plugins based on PHP 7.3. We should. We probably won't, because still a lot of people use hosting providers that don't have newer PHP versions, or at least, or they have parts of their homepage, their websites are so old that they don't run on the newer versions. So PHP 5.6 is a good compromise at this point. But if possible, for your customer user base, we should try to urge people to upgrade to PHP 7, or one of the recent 7-point releases. So you can have your plugin require a higher version of PHP than what WordPress core does. There's even a new plugin header, or it can be specified in the README, but unfortunately, all that is not enforced for WordPress versions lower than 5.2. So if you target an older version, you have to check the requirements yourself. And more importantly, since you don't want to crash people's WordPress installations just because they downloaded your plugin, your main plugin file needs to be compatible with the PHP version required by WordPress. So for everything, like if you say, for example, you still support WordPress 4.9 because of people who don't want Gutenberg, then your main plugin file needs to be PHP 5.2 compliant. I have written a small library that can be used to do these checks. I'll show an example how to use it, and it's linked in the slides. So I'll just talk a bit faster here now. Okay. So this is actually the main plugin file for Avatar Privacy. It's the complete file except for some comments. The boilerplate text with the license at the start of the file. And the first thing is I require the requirements class specifically, and it's only using the file magic constant, not beer, because for PHP 5.2. Only file is available. Then the plugin itself is the plugin check, the version check is encapsulated in a function, so that the global namespace doesn't get polluted. And I create a new requirement object, run the check method, and only inside there I can use the dir magic constant, because if the requirements check pass, I know, okay, this is PHP, at least PHP 5.6, and then I load the real auto loading stuff from which has been generated by Composer for me, which I'll talk about later. And then only then the plugin control I created, and the plugin starts up doing its thing. And of course, you can check for more than just the PHP version. You can check for extensions available, or another plugin that is there, or some function you need. For example, you could require the block editor either in the form of a sufficiently high WordPress version 5.0. Or people could have an older WordPress version with the Gutenberg plugin installed, so you can check for that. You're really pretty free to do that. But of course, I was talking about an autoloader, and for that, this is something that Composer does well. So if you have a plugin, chances are you're not writing all the code yourself, but you're using some libraries, packages that other people have created, at least for development, possibly also for the ship plugin. And in the wider PHP world, everybody uses Composer for things like this. It's a package dependency management system, and it also includes an auto-loading implementation that is pretty sophisticated. Packages can declare dependencies, which are runtime dependencies, and they can declare development dependencies, which are only used for development, like unit tests or stuff like that. And each package has a name that consists of a vendor prefix or a vendor and the actual package name. And this combination should be unique, or needs to be unique. And there's a repository, a public repository for packages called Packages. And you can switch things to your private repositories if you want, but the default is the public repository provided packages, where everybody can register packages. And also, yeah, there are a lot of things you can do. I'll skip over the usage thing because you can read it up online. It's easy to add new dependencies on the command line when you use Composer. Here's an example of a Composer configuration file. It's a simple JSON file that sits in the root of your plugin, or if it's not a plugin, so the library sits there, and it has the name of the package in the form vendor and package name and description. Yeah, also license is mandatory, and then a lot of optional sections like authors. What you see at the bottom, the require section, a part of the require section of a plugin. So I say it's, you can say what PHP version you want, any extensions you need, and any packages. So the problem, or Composer makes it very easy to install dependencies. The problem is when you want to use those in a WordPress context, you don't know what dependencies are loaded by other plugins. And since auto-loading happens via the class name, if another plugin is before you in the WordPress load order, it can happen that they load their version of your dependency, and then your plugin tries to create an object, but unfortunately, the old version loaded by the other plugin doesn't support the interface you're using, and everything crashed. You'll get a white screen. And the solution for this is to use dependency scoping when you use Composer. Dependency scoping means that you add a namespace to automatically add a namespace to all your dependencies so that they become unique. The namespace is really part of the class name, of the full class name, and if that's unique, you get your own version of dependency, and everything works out. Since this is a common problem, there are actually several tools available to fix this issue. One is Mozart, then we have Imposter, and these two are specifically designed for WordPress. And then there's PHP Scoper, which is mostly used for creating self-contained executables for in file archives for PHP-based tools. And unfortunately, each of these tools has its own limitations, and so you have to really check out if what you want to use it for, the dependency you're using, if those work out with one of the tools, or what you probably need to do is write a build script that does some skips some parts or rewrites parts that were changed in a way that you don't want. And so it has to be tailored, probably at the moment it has to be tailored for every plugin. For my plugins, I discovered that PHP Scoper was the most flexible to use. So I'm using that, but I have written some boilerplate code I need to use because, for example, to skip global WordPress functions from being scoped accidentally, and so it's not a fire and forget solution. So you need to do some tailoring. Something else you want to do is unit testing. Unit testing means is a white box test, so you know about the internals of your functions, and you want to test individual methods and functions, not the complete system. What you should look into is inversion of control or dependency injection. It makes unit testing much easier when a class has some dependency on another class. It shouldn't create the dependency itself, but rather provide a setter method or a constructor parameter to receive the dependency object you want to use. And then you can use this in your unit test to give the class a mock object and just look at what you want to test, not on all the dependencies which have a stable interface probably. So in PHP, which is a heavily built, there are new releases every year, new major versions, and currently at PHPUnit 9.x, the current version, support for PHP 7.4, and there are new releases. It is kind of opinionated habits. New major version, and PHPUnit, it is kind of opinionated, and version that supports PHP 5.6. You have the test as of the latest version. You can't use and the last version so that's some years ago. Breaking changes between the major versions of PHP, and you have to name the naming conventions anymore. It's not active. So that's the version of PHP. all projects that want to support a wide range of PHP versions. Some efforts have been made. I think 7.1, 7.0, I don't know, because they changed the PHPUnit, changed some method signatures, which broke the test. But there is a bridge, so you can work around it. And also with WordPress, you often need to mock PHP functions and filters and stuff like that. Some people have created the Brain Monkey library, which allows you to do that very easily with the underlying mockery, which is a widely used library for mocking objects in PHP. And I've created a custom base class integrating all these things. So both the PHPUnit bridge and Brain Monkey, which you can use if you want to. It's also on packages. With this, you get it just works between PHP 5 and 9, so all the versions in between. You can target everything from PHP 5.6 to 7.4 at the moment. Here's an example of such a unit test for a very simple function from one of my plugins. The gray stuff, the gray text above is the function we want to test. It's very simple. It's just it's actually a method of a class, but it just calls the getSource method and the hasher object. But it also calls a WordPress function to indicate that it's been deprecated and shouldn't be used anymore. So the test in red below, okay, you have the expected result, which is just my expected result value. And then there's a so-called function expectation, which says, okay, the deprecated function should be called once, exactly once, not more than once, with certain parameters, and it doesn't need to return anything. And also the hasher object should receive the getSource method once and return the expected result. And the last one version that says, okay, when I call my SUT, my system under test, when I call the getSource method on that, I get the expected value. And that's your unit test for this. So I don't know if you're using the PSRs for your coding standards, or if you follow the WordPress coding standards, but they are quite different. And outside of WordPress, people generally use the various PSRs. So mostly nowadays PSR4 and PSR12. While WordPress core uses older or different, for example, different naming conventions, using snake case for everything, which means separating parts with underscores. And also the class files are named with a prefix, and various other things like different, like where you place your braces in if you have for example an if condition, where do you place the brace on the next line, on the same line as the condition, and how many do you use spaces inside brackets and stuff like that. And there exist very detailed guidelines for this. So if you want to comply with these coding standards, there are tools for automatically checking this. The main one is PHPCS, which can be required using Squishlab's PHP_code sniffer. And this is the main tool that runs so-called code sniffs. And then you have WPCS, which is a package provided by WordPress that includes the WordPress coding standards and adds them as sniffs that PHPCS can use. Also, for example, we have something like PHP compatibility, which you can use to check that you are not using PHP features that are not available in your targeted PHP version. in my experience, it's best to use all these tools with Composer. It's possible to install them globally, but then you'll probably get version differences between when you work on different projects. So just use Composer inside the project, and you'll always have the right version available. So as we've seen, using all these things requires a bit of infrastructure to do it, to make things easier for you. You need to build stuff, to check stuff. So it would be best if you could automate this, no? So for this, there's something called task runners, which is, I think it comes from the JavaScript world. In other languages, in compiled programming languages, you often have make files to do these things. Here we have for in the web world, so to speak, we have task runners, which are Grunt and Gulp, which, well, I think they are available for some years now, and both are based on Node. Can be configured by using a JavaScript file or several files, and they can be used to automate tasks that need to happen very often. For example, if you have a plugin that includes blocks for the block editor, Gutenberg, you need to build the blocks from your source files, because all this React stuff needs to be transpiled. Easiest if you use the WordPress scripts package. You might want to run PHPCS with some special settings some of the time. You can do that with a task. You'll probably, if you use Composer, you want to scope your PHP dependencies, as we've talked about. You might also want to remove any unnecessary files from the build directory you will be uploading to the WordPress plugin repository. And yeah, finally, you'll also have to get all the things you have written into the plugin repository, which needs to use the version, which is yeah, a bit difficult if you're used to Git. So there's a task for this as well. And I'm using Grunt in my plugins. Gulp works a bit different, but it can do a lot of the same things. Of course, you could also write a shell script for running all these tasks, but I found that there are so many Grunt tasks, pre-made Grunt tasks available, that it's easier to do it this way. Also, I got to learn a bit of JavaScript in the process. Not very nice, but so here you see how such a configuration would look like, and you can also register your own tasks where you say, okay, I want to have a shortcut for doing several things at once in a certain order, and you can do that with Grunt register tasks, for example. You see at the bottom, yeah. And well, so now this is all task runners and everything that was on your local development machine. But sometimes it's easier if you actually run all these checks and unit tests, and if you do that in the cloud. And probably it's also it's good if you do that if you run it not just once a day or something, but on every commit or every time you create a pull request on GitHub. And for this, there are continuous integration platforms. One of the best known is Travis CI. I also use Scrutinizer CI, and since last year, there's also you can also do things directly on GitHub using GitHub Actions. And all three of these are free for use for open source software, and there are paid plans if you have a closed source project you want to use them for. So Travis, for example, it provides a build environment. You can specify different PHP versions. and for example, run your unit tests once on every PHP version to make sure everything works all right on all versions. You can export code coverage data. What it doesn't do anymore is PHP 5.2. That's not been available for some years now. I think WordPress core has a workaround where they built their own version of PHP, which is possible. But since this slows down builds quite a bit, I don't do it for my plugins, even though they still have some the main plugin files still have PHP 5.2. I just do a PHPCS check on those, so and some linking. Since they don't change very often, it's enough in my opinion. Scrutinizer CI, on the other hand, is a static analysis tool. It analyzes your code, looks for logic bugs. For example, when you're assuming a certain data type for a variable, and the function you use could return either an object or a Boolean value, and you don't check if you got a false on error, then that's something that Scrutinizer would catch. It also analyzes the complexity of your classes and methods, and gives you hints what methods would probably benefit from a refactoring. Besides PHP, it also supports JavaScript and some other languages, but so for your WordPress project, you can use it on your complete code base, both the PHP part and the JavaScript part. It can also run additional checkers like PHPCS or ESLint. So you can integrate the findings from those as well into the analysis that the Scrutinizer provides. GitHub Actions, new feature of GitHub since last year. I think it was a closed beta at first. Now it's public. Since it's directly integrated with the repository, it should be a bit faster. I have not experimented yet with it because changing a workflow, an existing workflow, takes time away from other things. So I'm still waiting here, but it's a huge ecosystem, and lots of people are moving their pipelines to GitHub Actions. So it's worth a look if you start out fresh. And there's also there's already a GitHub action to automate uploading to the plugin repository. So it's something I'll probably be exploring as well. Yeah, we'll see. Oh, yeah, we are through for the moment. Do you have any questions for me?